Hello, and welcome to Classical Schmassical, an anti-classical classical music podcast. Tune in every Saturday as we discuss, deconstruct, and dissect what it means to be a musician in the modern world. I'm your new host, Murphy Severtson. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm excited to introduce our guest. Joshua Roman is a cellist, composer, and curator whose performances embrace musical styles from Bach to Radiohead. Before setting off on his unique path as a soloist, Roman was the Seattle Symphony's principal cellist, a job he began at just 22 years of age. He's also become renowned for his genre-bending repertoire and wide-ranging collaborations. He was also named a TED Senior Fellow in 2015. Collaborators include Tony winner and MacArthur Genius Grant recipient Bill T. Jones, East African vocalist Somi, the Jack St. Lawrence and Verona Quartets, Tony-nominated actor Anna Deavere Smith, poet Tracy K. Smith, violinist Vadim Gluzman, and conductor David Danzmayr. Roman's outreach endeavors have taken him to Uganda with his violin-playing siblings, where they played chamber music in schools, HIV and AIDS centers, and displacement camps. On January 14th, Roman will perform Tandun's Crouching Tiger Suite and premiere Donna Milovanic's composer-in-residence Reynaldo Moya's cello concertino Rise with the Chicago Philharmonic. Also programmed on the concert, guitar Sharon Isbin will perform the American premiere of Dune's Concerto for Guitar and Orchestra, Ye 2. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Murphy. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So the first question I wanted to ask is just sort of a general question about what is the landscape of classical music to you? What does it look like? Where do you see it going? Where do you see it coming from? What is sort of the best case scenario of the future of classical music? I know this is a big question, but
it's a light talk to begin. Yeah, small talk.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Let's dive in. Yes, I mean, I think it's interesting right now. I feel like over the last 10, especially last 10, but over the maybe even the last 20, 30 years, there's been a growing interest in maybe questioning what classical music is and what it isn't. And one of my favorite things that has come out of that is a renewed interest in the parts of the tradition that help us move forward. So not necessarily the canon, which we idolize, the great pieces of 100, 200, 300 years ago, but like, what were the composers doing? What was the environment that allowed for people to be creative and to make works that would last that long, that we're still impressed by them? And ultimately, for me, that's not the goal, but the goal is to be a part of a living environment and a living tradition of creativity and connection and aspiration. And that traces its roots to before something called classical music was called classical music. And I love that framing it in that way gives us an opportunity to write the future in a way that is more inclusive of both the past and the present and the future, I think. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, and sort of, that's such a phenomenal response, because I feel like it encapsulates a lot of the sort of current moment of discontent with classical music, because I think that we're in this sort of period of like trying to reckon and trying to move forward, but also like acknowledgement of the thing that we call our careers.
Right.
And so what is at like the heart of it? You do a lot of collaboration. Is that sort of at the heart of this conversation for you?
I think it's a big part of it. One of the things that has driven me is my own personal experience, obviously, but it's a bit different than what people might expect who don't read further into the bio. I actually grew up in Oklahoma, where I was pretty much the only cellist that I knew. And so I just played with everybody. And I played with my friends who played whatever instrument was around. Didn't matter what the style was. I picked up other instruments and learned how to play them also. And for me, that was very important and formative And so when I went to conservatory at 16 and suddenly was surrounded with only classical musicians, that was the anomaly for me.
Mm.
And it was really interesting to dive in and learn more. And it's not like I was trying to avoid that before, it's just what was around me. And it felt very natural to be a musician and to share and to collaborate with anyone who was creative and wanted to make a connection. So I've tried to honor that and keep that as a part of my life. And every once in a while, something has happened to bring that forward from the background and into the center stage in my career. And it's it's been interesting to watch that dance, whether that's accepted as something that a soloist does, or whether that is something that sets me apart, or even is interesting but like quirky and not great. So
Hmm.
it's been a fun exploration. Collaborating is central to what I do, and being open to collaborating with people who speak a different musical language is important to me, not only from a philosophical perspective, but also just because it helps me connect with my roots. So
Yeah. No, that's a really fascinating background that I think more and more classical musicians are starting to have, which I think is
yes,
really, really exciting.
agreed.
Um, yeah, and what what would you say sort of defines your definition of what a soloist is? Yeah.
It's funny you asked that. I actually struggle with the word, and
Hmm.
it's not just because of thinking about it, but also because of things that were said to me when I was much younger about
Mm.
the arrogance of calling yourself a soloist. But it's just also funny when I go to work and my dressing room says soloist, or
Hmm.
there was one time a few years ago, I'm talking about it as if I sort of have a little bit of trouble with the word. I used to not be able to say the word at all, and
Yeah.
I was traumatized by something I'd been told at a younger age, to the point where I think it was with the Scottish BBC orchestra, BBC
Hmm.
Scottish Symphony, and I was playing there and happened to glimpse the itinerary of the conductor, and we typically have a meeting with the soloist and the conductor. And for me, it's called the conductor meeting. And so I go to the conductor meeting and we run through the piece before I go out and play it. And um, I caught a glimpse of this conductor's itinerary and it said soloist meeting. And I was like, wait, what? I'm the
Yeah.
soloist? And it was a weird thing. It's a funny thing. It really cracked something open for me that I had been denying the role that I was in. And
Yeah.
so it's a trick, it's a loaded word for me, I think a bit extra. And I'm coming around to, I said the word
Hmm.
soloist, and I'm trying to practice saying that and being comfortable with it. Because when I get on stage alone, I'm a soloist. When I get on stage as the guest musician with an orchestra, often the piece is written to showcase me or
Yeah.
the cello, and I'm there
Hmm.
playing the cello. So to deny that role is a weird thing that almost makes it harder for everyone else to do their job. And
Yeah.
so the question is, what does it do that's bad? And I think the idea of the virtuoso who's removed and who does everything alone and who is so much better than everybody else that they should just grovel,
Hmm.
the Paganini, the Paganini thing. I mean, I think I'm not going to say there's no place for that, but I think that a lot
Right.
of people get that in their heads, and that can be a harmful image. And using a word that has those connotations for a lot of people, um, it speaks to immediately brings up things for people who either have never wanted that or wanted that and didn't get it, or who
Yeah.
it's complicated. It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's another sort of aspect of music that is hard to grapple with sometimes, is that it is in some ways a very solitary art.
Yes.
Um, like, practicing for 12 to 17 hours a day, and
Yeah.
I mean, even for composing, it's sitting at the computer. But then the act of making music, even in a solo sense, is such a communal act, because you're, even if it's just you with your cello on stage, you're still engaging with people who are theoretically, listening and engaging with your music. So I guess it's an interesting question of like, how do you find ways to engage with the sort of act of being alone and cultivating your craft, and then also like engaging with uh, your orchestra and conductors and collaborators, yeah, what's that balance look like for you?
That's a good way of jumping into it. I mean, I think that I the thing that I think about when I'm playing is exactly that. That like if no one is around, then sure, it's kind of fun, but it's not the same. It doesn't do the same
Hmm.
thing. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't sound the same. It's just not, I don't know. It's totally different. And so for me, soloist isn't supposed to be alone.
Yeah.
Um, but almost, I mean, you're in a moment where people's attention are focused on you. And what do you do with
Mm.
that? You have to lead and direct that attention somewhere.
Hmm.
And you have to, if you're alone on stage, that means it's the music, it's the connection that brings, and starts with choosing the music that you're going to play for people, and thinking about why you want people to hear that music. And then it goes to the moment where you're playing, and uh, what are your actions directed towards. And when you've got other people that you're collaborating with on stage, that's also beautiful and entirely different, because you can you can be a leader. I feel like when I play the Dvorak cello concerto, I
Hmm.
have, of course, in the story of the musical story, the cello has the main role, and it's a cello concerto, and it's designed to do that. But if I just do that and ignore the orchestra, the piece doesn't have the same power as if I lead the orchestra. And
Yeah.
if I'm engaged with them, if I'm helping the conductor, not getting in the way. That's the other thing. It's like the conductor is the leader of the orchestra. The concertmaster has a role. My
Hmm.
role is to play this part of
Hmm.
soloist, and to see where that intersects, where that inspiration can be injected, to find the people behind the sounds, behind the instruments,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
inspire us to co-create each moment, and to be really fully present for it, and not just checked out, moving our arms or
Hmm.
blowing our horns. So
Gosh, that's such a phenomenal answer, because I feel it's I mean, it's always about passion, right? Like
yeah.
that's sort of the end bit of the conversation that I think um like we're trying to have. uh but also I feel like you used so many strong words, and there's a lot of strong emotion and passion behind this type of art and this type of craft. um how how then do you sort of like deal with that pressure? Because I think that there's a lot of internal drive and a lot of internal pressure
Mm,
to be whatever it is we need to be as artists and
yes.
as soloists. um I think one of the things I know a lot of composers struggle with is like, I have to write music that means something or that says something.
Hmm.
um so as a soloist and as someone who is communicating, your work as a composer, and then also other works of composers, how do you deal with that pressure?
It's such a good question, and it's kind of strange maybe, but the thing that has started to make it all easier in terms of communicating an essence,
Hmm.
um, and the pressure that of like, it's almost like an ethical pressure. It's like, is it
Yeah,
focus on me or the music, you know?
it sometimes feels like a duty.
A duty. I like that. Yeah, it
Yeah.
it can. But the thing that makes it has started to make that so much easier is spending more time with composers.
Yeah.
because when I get to know the people who are asking me to do something, which is what composing is. You're giving a set of instructions and you're asking somebody to communicate that idea. The number of times that I've played for a composer and they've been super concerned about like intonation or perfection have been incredibly small. I'm not going to say they haven't happened, but like it's been minuscule compared to the number of times a composer is excited to hear life in these sounds that were abstract sound in their head, and then want to get to the bottom of like the raison d'etre for the piece. Like, why is this piece this way? Let's communicate that. And the thing that I take great comfort in, and this eases the pressure throughout the whole process for me, even through the performances, is focusing on the why. And that makes all the other stuff seem like it's in service of that, and that takes away nerves and anxiety, because it's much, I don't know, for me, maybe it's not true for everybody, but I feel like if on a very basic level, if my goal is to share joy or to share sadness, I'm not going to get as nervous about that as I am going to be like, my goal is to hit this octave perfectly, and it's right in this tiny little spot. So the octave belongs in service to the thing that's being communicated. And when that alignment is there, everything from thinking to collaborating to practicing to performing gets easier.
That is such a good way. The octave being in service to the reason is such a phenomenal way to frame technique. You know, I think in a lot of conversations about I think that as a composer, I'm often like, I don't care about the technique as long as you get the feel, the essence, which is what you mentioned, right? But I think that there is definitely like there's a reason why the technique is developed, and good technique often will result in a more clear and concise communication of the emotion of the piece of music. Yeah.
Yes,
So
but it's inherent in the name itself, though. Technique is the how. What technique are you using to communicate blank? So you have to have blank. That's the whole thing. And then the technique is built around that. And in a fairly specific, what's the word? Not siloed, but we've gotten so focused on one element of what we do, especially through the 20th century. But technique has become
down.
And it's all about, and we're getting away from that again. I think it's a broad brush to paint with, but technique is not everything, but it has outpaced other elements, I think, of what we do. And you see that in teaching from the very beginning, from when kids are handed an instrument. And, you know, is it fun and expression, or is it doing it right?
Yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, how, if we could move on to, you know, talking about teaching, do you feel that like your background as a person who was not sort of raised specifically hardcore in the classical music tradition, but rather in a more holistic and like maybe one might describe it as natural sort of musical upbringing, do you feel like that has really impacted the way in which you teach to younger people, or especially younger people who are coming to you from a sort of more conservatory based background?
Definitely. I it's always fun to open people's eyes a little bit, and especially when people have seen a narrow part of something that you do, and they look at you in a certain light, and then to say, well, sure, you got to be great at that, but that's not everything. So let's take a look at what else is important to you and figure out why that's not coming across. There are so many people that are over specialized is
Yeah.
actually the word I was looking for earlier, was specialized. Over
Yeah.
specialization from such a young age. And it's so weird to me. It's so weird that we've created this, I will call it a silo, this silo where
Hmm.
your training on an instrument can be so developed and your technique can go, almost the sky's the limit. But then you're a fan of some, like, let's say Justin Timberlake. I know that's an old reference now, but you're a fan of Justin Timberlake, and he's your favorite artist, and then somebody asks you to play one of the tunes and you can't,
Yeah.
or you can't do it in the style that he
Hmm.
does. It's like that stuff. It's, to me, it's such a shame that that's not a part of our training, is to find the things that we love that are music and learn how to
Yeah.
express them as a part of our technique.
Hmm.
And for me, that's always been there because of my musical upbringing, because of especially my parents. I had
Hmm.
very fairly, I would say, my classical teacher, he was great. I think the only non-standard thing about that is that he's a violinist. So I
Yes. Yeah.
studied with a violinist for the first 10 years, even though I was on the cello.
Hmm.
And
And you
otherwise it
started
was,
lessons. Did you start lessons with him when you were 3
that's right. Yeah.
on the
Suzuki
cello?
method on the cello. He would demonstrate on his
Incredible.
violin. And, but it was it was a fairly, I would say, standard
Hmm.
classical experience as far as Mr. McClary was concerned. But it
Hmm.
was the other parts of my life, which were the daily parts and weekly parts of my musical experience from the earliest of ages, that were the creative, flexible, improvising, collaborating ones that really
Hmm.
shaped this. And I do feel are important. Not that every kid needs to know how to do everything, but if you love music that you don't play because someone told you that it's not proper, I have a
Yeah.
problem.
No, absolutely. And I think, yeah, it does seem like you can do everything. You know,
That's the goal, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean,
No.
I think it's an interesting, I continually I start to see more and more composer performers. You know, I think
Mhm.
that is starting, thank gosh.
Yes.
I It's such an exciting growth of a group of people, that I feel is, you know, really starting to make a little comeback.
Come back.
So
That's good. Yes,
yeah.
because that is the tradition until the 20th
Yeah,
century.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and how would you feel like, you know, doing composition, and did you start like composing at a very specific time? Was it always something that you engaged with as a performer? Like, was it something that came naturally to you? I would love to hear more about your compositional journey.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you the story of how I began composing because I think it's so hilarious. It's an example of me wearing those blinders that I was given about what things are and what they're supposed to be and the different roles. I, I guess I played around a tiny bit with it when I was a kid. Like I would write one line and I'd be like, this is going to be my symphony. But it would just be like one violin line, 10 measures max. And I was encouraged to do a composition thing when I was like 13 and I did it, but I didn't really pay much attention to it and I improvised half of it. Um,
Hmm.
so it was much later. I'm trying to remember, I would have been around 30, a little younger, I think, but around 30 years old when I was collaborating with Anna Deavere Smith on a
Hmm.
project called On Grace. And if any of our listeners don't know who she is, you should check her out.
Hmm.
She's an amazing actor, powerful figure, activist. She created her own form of theater where she interviews people on a subject, a bunch of
Hmm.
different people on one subject, and then will act out over the course of an evening length performance, act out those characters and what they're saying and give you a really well rounded picture of an idea or an event. So she's done the healthcare system, the LA race
Yeah.
riots, like all sorts of things. And we did one on Grace. And
Mm.
as we were working together, she really wanted the cello to be not just background, but to like become a character. And this was new for her. And so she put a lot of trust in me, and I was taking that very seriously. And so I went straight to Bach. It's like, wow, this is to work with Anna Deavere Smith, first of all, but then to have this trust to do something new and become
Yeah.
an equal partner in the creation of this thing. And we were using Bach for a while, and then at a certain point I was like, we need something longer here, or we need something shorter. I don't remember, longer or shorter. And the mood just doesn't stay the same long enough with this. And I don't want to start chopping up Bach. And she was like, no, 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 we can't do that. So I went home and I gathered all of my recordings of every solo cello piece that I could think of, the Ligeti, the Crumb, the Kodai, pieces my friends had written, and I sent all of those to her, and she dutifully listened to those. And the next time we got together, this is where it gets really, really trippy for me. The next time we got together, I remember it was the Ligeti. I was using the opening for something, and because it has almost this folk-like simplicity, and
Right.
and it just wasn't quite right. And I was like, it's just not quite right. And she's like, I know, you're right. It's beautiful, but it's not quite capturing it. I was like, I'm so sorry. I will go back and look more, but what we're looking for, I just can't find it. It's something like this. And I just busted out with this riff that I made up. And she was like, oh, that one. Play that one. And I was like, I'm sorry, that's not a thing. I can't play that one. It's not a piece. And she was like, I don't understand. You just played it. Play it again. And we had this surreal exchange where I started to realize that that's what composing was. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. But it goes farther, because I did this, and we did this program that actually this weekend's performance at the Harris Theater, the last time I was
Oh,
there, was with
wow.
Anna doing On Grace.
Oh my
So
gosh.
this is a full circle moment. It's really exciting,
Yeah.
and we've been in touch about it all week. Um, so that was about 45 minutes of solo cello music that was quasi-composed, largely improvised. And the next year, Grace Cathedral came back to me, and they said, we want a solo cello piece to celebrate our next artist in residence. It's a visual artist, so we need to commission a piece. But it was like 2 months before the concert. And I said, none of my composer friends are going to be able to do this. And they're like, oh, we'll ask. And so I gave them a list. They asked. Of course, everyone said no, they were too busy. So they came back to me and they said, well, you wrote that music last year. Why don't you write a piece? And I said, no, 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 I didn't write it. And they're like, we don't understand. It was your music. And I was like, again, this surreal conversation where I was stuck in this way of thinking with these false boundaries. And I couldn't explain why I hadn't composed. And that made me realize that I could compose. And so I took that. That was actually what I consider my first piece, because I wrote all of the notes of Riding Light from beginning to end, this 10-minute solo cello piece. And it was all based on a natural misunderstanding that led me to realize that creativity doesn't have boundaries, but those boundaries are false. And I just, it's an anecdote. It's my own personal experience, but I've learned a lot from questioning the boundaries and from being around people who needed an explanation and I couldn't explain. And I wish more people would have that experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would also say that I think that that's an experience that a lot of people, well, maybe not the Anna Deavere Smith sort of communique,
Right.
but I do think that it's an experience that a lot of musicians have of coming into a realization through whatever way that their musicianship is not bound by anything.
Yes.
And I hope that we see just more and more of that. And I think that it's interesting to think about future generations and how we can teach future generations to not construct those false boundaries.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard.
It's hard because we do also, anytime we're communicating something, the words themselves we have to have a common understanding of what they mean. And there's a boundary.
Yeah.
And it's complicated because it's living, it's life, it's human, and
Hmm.
that's complicated and always evolving. So it's a weird balance between understanding structure and being freed by it rather than constrained by it.
Hmm.
It's hard.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's also
No,
joyful. It's fun.
yeah. Well, I think that's the thing that I would like more people to know about composing and performing music, is that it's fun.
Yeah, yes. I mean, that's the fun thing. So, like, I'm curious, you compose.
Hmm.
What is it like for you when you get a good idea? How do you
Oh, I mean,
feel?
it's the best. It's so it's like euphoric. I mean, and then
Yeah,
sometimes I go to sleep and I wake up and I'm like, oh, that's not good.
of course, always. But
That's the worst. That's the worst. But I think that there is, I think you kept saying like it's not right. That is such a like a
mm,
ubiquitous feeling, I think. I think that there is a innate human understanding of what is right and what is not right for a type of a project, right? Like
right.
because there were boundaries to the project, to On Grace,
Hmm.
that you had, right? And you knew how to fix them inherently as a musician who has studied like this craft. And I think that there's like something about clicking into place and hitting that note perfect, hitting that octave perfectly, and also like knowing that it should be an E flat instead of a G, you
Yeah.
know, in a piece of music. And just hearing that that music hitting in a more specific and more different, a sort of more more
Wow.
refined way, I think has a lot of, it's not something that is really definable.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's up to you to define. And
Right.
that's you mentioned earlier, you said something like, sounds like you can do everything or something like that. And
Hmm.
I said, oh, that's the goal. But actually, um, maybe the goal is to seem like you can. But ultimately, if you're always trying to do everything, you'll never do anything. And
Yeah.
those boundaries or those limits, they can be helpful. And I think the problem is when they become more important than the act of creating itself.
Hmm.
And that's a key part of the relationship is what what is keeping you on track
Yeah.
and what is a roadblock.
Yeah.
um, and that's not even to say what the path is, but there's sometimes we can feel it and sometimes we can't. I don't know, it's not always easy, but playing with that relationship is, I think,
Hmm.
important. That relationship between the creative impulse and the things that help us focus in a way that moves something forward.
Totally. Yeah. So like what are the things that keep you on track, you know, like regardless, maybe even what are the non-musical things that keep you on track?
Yeah, I mean, just time.
Yeah.
Every time I think about life and how short it is, really, and everything that I want to do, I'm like, oh no, I got to narrow this list down because
Yeah.
I can't do that much today. Today is just
Yeah.
one day. And um, I also, one of the to me that actually is a joyful thought. I love
Yeah.
thinking about the fact that life is short. It spurs me to action. It makes me more cognizant of the preciousness of each moment.
Hmm.
Um, that it is, if it were limitless, then I wouldn't care. So
Yeah.
that's important, and it leads me to other joyful things like people.
Hmm.
People are so
Yeah.
important to me. I love just being with people, and outside of music, family and friends and love are so important. And then bringing that into music as well, and working with people that I love and that I
Hmm.
respect is very important to me. So that helps limit things because there are so many people in the world, there are so many opportunities. I can't work with everybody. Um,
Hmm.
so let's go off of the energy that's there, and the potential to build beautiful things that I want to be a part of. And if I want to be a part of it, then maybe other people see that too and want to be a part of it.
Ugh, that that ooh, chills. Yeah. Oh, so sort of circling back, what are you most excited about for this upcoming concert with the Chicago Phil?
Well, the thing that got me to say yes immediately to this concert was the fact that both are pieces by living composers.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, for the world premiere by Ronaldo, I didn't know the piece because it hadn't been written.
Right.
And for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, I love the movie. I'd seen it a long time ago, and I think I knew that it had been arranged as a cello concerto, but maybe not. And
Mm-hmm.
that's such a cool idea to me. I've always loved um, cinematic things, the scope,
Mm-hmm.
the when you get a good chunk of time and a good story, just like where you can go with it and what can happen to characters along the way and what inside of you can be moved and unlocked and touched. It's a beautiful thing, and I think about that a lot when I'm practicing particularly dynamic music or when I'm writing music. And so to play a film score essentially
Mm-hmm.
just seems super cool. And I love working with a lot of percussion. So
Mm-hmm.
two living composers, a world premiere, I'm there. Cool.
I'll jot that down for my future to
Oh yeah,
how to get Joshua Roman.
new music.
Yeah.
Living thing.
Oh,
I love
yeah.
it.
Is there anything else that you're interested in, promoting or talking about? I would love to hear more about your Patreon, actually.
Yes, Patreon is interesting. I started it a few years ago, and uh, the idea with Patreon, I think a lot of people probably know it by now because during the pandemic, early days, it was used quite a bit. But I had been on it because it felt like a natural way to help me develop some of the creative things that I was doing, not only in terms of music, like directly, like creating music, but also in terms of projects, in
Hmm.
terms of engaging with an audience and offering people different ways to tailor their experience. I think social media is uh, so powerfully impacting us in ways that are really difficult to navigate and feel good about. And um, something like Patreon, it's just for now, at least, it's a platform where you go there and you do that thing and you leave. And I feel good about
Yeah.
that. I feel
Hmm.
good about being able to offer people things where they're supporting me directly, and
And on their terms.
advertisers aren't, yeah, on their,
Yeah.
exactly, on their terms. I'm offering something, and when I first built it, the idea was to offer things that I basically would be doing anyway. So most of it's
Right.
kind of a backstage look
Hmm.
of what's going on. I do practice sessions where I talk a lot when I practice when I'm alone. So basically, I just do the same thing without the swearing on
Hmm.
Patreon for the most part.
That's
And
the $15 tier is the uncensored
yeah,
version.
right. And I'll stay in my pajamas for no, it's like it's actually sometimes I think I am in my pajamas, my nice, very comfortable
Mhm.
pajamas. So
Yeah, of course.
yeah, but it's very, to me, it's very interesting because it is speaking to that idea that an artist is not just this mythical,
Yeah.
mysterious, magical being who shows up on stage and gives you something that you could never understand. It's a person, it's a human being who's going through a process. And I don't think it's any less magical to see
Yeah.
that process. So that's what that's all about.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree. And I'm interested in social media as we all are, I'm sure. I think uh it's an interesting idea because I think that in some ways, um social media can amplify a mythic
Hmm.
artist as well. So, and then even it's like, stars, they're just like us, trying even the act of trying to do that as well can be a bit mythic as well. Um, so yeah, I think Patreon has a lot of pros with regard to, you're engaging in something really intentional.
Hmm.
And I think that that's another thing that I'm interested in, like engaging with further is, intentionality and engaging with, I want to do this project instead of this project. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, and is that's something that I'm sure you've had to do a lot of in your career. And how have you found the balance between all of that as well?
That's been tough for me. That's something that I've only really been learning in the past 2 years.
Hmm.
I have, if you read my bio, it seems like I've just done so many things, and it's true, but also I haven't like gone that as deeply as I would like with a lot of them. A lot of them are
Mm,
one-offs or things that just sort of happen to be there, and um, I'm generally a yes guy, even though I can be very like I bring a lot of I think I don't want to use the word criticism, but I bring a lot of I have a lot of ideas,
yeah,
but generally it's within the context of yes.
yeah,
So
of course.
I do a lot of participating, and
Hmm.
what happens when you're always participating is that you're not giving time for your own ideas, the seeds of future projects to take root and to grow. And I've been learning that it's actually been challenging because it's something that I've tried to learn and I've known that I needed in my life. And it actually took a major health event for me to finally
Hmm.
put it into practice. And I'm still going through this, or feels like the early stages of learning what it's like to be more intentional and start projects that I'm actually going to finish instead of running around doing a bunch of things.
Yeah,
It's
and I mean,
fascinating.
it's fascinating. I don't mean to get into this too deeply, with our time constraints, but you speak of like a major health event. I in high school ended up like getting diagnosed with some really chronic health issues, and
Mm.
before that, I was like a really major soccer player,
Oh,
and I continued to sort of, I mean, I talk about strange paths into music. That's sort of what made me consider it more
wow.
seriously, um, because it made me sort of realize that this is a way in which I can express myself, touch people, understand myself deeper, etc. But also, this is a way in which I can balance those things and try and do what I can to like communicate, but also know that not everyone is going to understand. But
Mhm.
yeah, so it's it is life shattering. I mean, every routine that you have is disrupted by illness, I think. And I think that's not something that we talk about very often, especially in the music world. I think that there is of um, a lot of things that are expected of musicians and artists that not everyone can physically do. Um, yeah, it's
It's
really
true.
difficult. It's really difficult. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm sorry, first of all, to hear that you had to go through that. It sounds like you've really come through it and
Hmm.
found something beautiful. And I am so happy that that's the case. It doesn't
Yeah.
make the struggle easier
Right, of
necessarily.
course, of course. I mean, all these
Um,
stories of like, they beat the odds. I didn't want the odds to begin with.
yeah,
I could have
that's
done without the odds.
that's my daily thing. I mean, this is so yesterday was my 2 year anniversary of getting testing positive for COVID, and I have long
Wow.
COVID, which I've
Yeah.
now had for whenever it officially starts after getting COVID. I've had it for
Hmm.
2 years essentially,
Wow. Yeah.
and it is debilitating. It is a constant struggle. Even a conversation like this is something that requires a lot of energy management,
Mm-hmm.
and cognitive things are a struggle for me. Physical things are a struggle. And so playing was very much put into question for a while and is still something that I have to manage. Composing is really difficult because I struggle, especially with the cognitive things.
The brain
And
fog.
the
Yeah.
brain fog, which is such a generic term, but there specifically I have, if you think of the brain as like a computer, my
Mm-hmm.
processor gets overloaded very easily. So
Mm-hmm.
my best example of that is when I first started playing again, after COVID. I was working the Saint-Saëns cello concerto up,
Mm-hmm.
which is only 20 minutes long, and I learned it when I was like 13, so whatever, fine. But
Whatever.
yeah, but I could only play for like 5 minutes at a time before I'd be
Yeah.
shaking violently or unable to lift my arms or open my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally worked my way up to where I could play 20 minutes, I could play the piece. And that was a major victory,
Mm-hmm.
a couple weeks into trying to do that. And then I was like, okay, now that I can play it through, I have to practice it. And what I discovered right away was that I had a choice. I could play through the Saint-Saëns for 20 minutes, or I could practice one phrase for 1 minute, and the same thing would happen. I would be shaking, unable to lift my arms. Sometimes I had to have help tightening my bow, untightening
Mm-hmm.
my bow. What's that called? Loosening, loosening my bow, putting the cello away. And things are much better now in terms of my ability to manage this chronic
Mm-hmm.
condition, but it is absolutely forcing me to prioritize. And the thing is, like, I always, sorry, for the last few years,
Mm-hmm.
I've known that I need to prioritize if I really want to do what I want to do. That I look at what's the way I make decisions, and I see a lack of belief in my own ideas sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
that that's not going to happen until I follow through, and that that's not going to happen until I start saying no. And nothing that I tried so many things to teach myself that. Nothing worked. And I
Yeah.
did not ask to get sick, but it's the thing that worked.
Right.
It's so
Yeah.
crazy.
It's so crazy. I mean, I remember when I first started recovering, I had to it was a, like you say, it's a daily struggle to find your routines and to say no and to know your body. I mean, I think that's the real
Yeah.
crux of the issue. But I had my days scheduled by 15-minute increments.
Yes. Totally.
And that's what I had to do to get to a place where I could like function, which is
Yeah.
so bizarre. And like, but I think it really teaches you to know know your body and know what your limits are and understand like that type of stuff. And I I guess I understand how exhausting that can be. Yeah. And I
It
think
feels
that
like a lot, but you're
yeah,
learning essentially to be your own personal manager,
yeah.
which
Sometimes
is
there are
important.
things that you have to force quit.
Yeah.
And yeah. Yeah, so I commend you. And I mean, for someone who works obviously as hard as you do and does as many things as you do, it's really like, I mean, I don't want to say it's like admirable because we're all just out here sort of doing
Which
our
is who
best.
we are. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that like I understand how tiring it can be. And I it's very heartening to see someone as accomplished as you be as open about this. And yeah.
Well, back to what you were starting to say, I think with the musicians and how much we share about what's going on, it
Yeah.
is also part of that mystique of the I can do
Mhm.
something that you can't, where you have to there does seem to be a little bit of magic about it. And to
Mhm.
admit that you've got an issue, like how many people have playing related stress injuries?
Right.
or whatever they're called, stress-related
Yeah.
playing injuries from overuse, and never say anything.
Never
And
say
that's
anything.
definitely better than it was 30 years ago. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. But it's still, I believe, generally a taboo subject.
I would
I've been
agree.
so encouraged every time I've seen a young person taking time off and just saying because of my wrist. Like that was so, I remember when I was in school, there were very few people who were brave enough to actually say that that was what was going on. And so many people are dealing with things like that. This feels hard because it's not understood yet.
Yes,
It's a new
totally.
condition, and it's basically saying like, I have trouble making it through things. And so it is every time, I mean, to like, we can cut this part out later if you want, but my manager asked me in an email if it would be okay to talk about this,
Yeah.
because this is a public facing thing, and that's the kind of question that is very sensitive, and I'm being open about it because I don't feel like I have a choice, because
Yeah.
it does affect me, and I want to be honest, and I want to represent not only cellists well, but people who have long COVID. It's extraordinary the number of people right now. I think there are over 1 million people out of work because of long COVID. The report in the US alone. And we don't know that much about it. I'm happy to be in a program with Mount Sinai in New York that treats it, and speaking fairly regularly with some of the lead researchers right now, and they're learning things, but it's just going to take a long time. So in the meantime, I've decided to embrace what it is right now, and hopefully it's not a part of me forever, but while it is, I can't pretend that it's not. And so I'm actually there'll be more about this soon as I work on projects, one project in particular that will deal directly with what this means in a musical way, and allow me to continue doing what I do, and also be hopefully inspiring people by, you know, putting myself
Being
out there,
truthful.
and being
Yeah.
truthful, and showing people something about a big thing that's going on. So it's a weird moment for sure, but it's also an opportunity. Anytime you're faced with something like this, it's an opportunity to step into a space and embrace the humanness of yourself and of other people. So, you know, lessons in humanness, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we're just about at time. Is there anything else you want to touch on before I wrap us up?
Not that I can think of. I'm super grateful to be on this, and that we're talking about the concert this weekend, which hope everyone in Chicago who hears this will come out to see at the Harris Theater. I love getting into the spirit of both of these pieces. I guess the one thing I would share is a little bit about the music, which I didn't really dive into.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm just grateful for the opportunity to connect, and love chatting with you about deep things. No small talk here.
No, I know. It's my first episode on the pod, and I immediately
congratulations.
got
It's super
into it.
super fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
Why listen to a podcast where we're talking about the weather? So
yeah.
so I'm in. So yeah, what I would say about the music, the Rise, the commissioned piece by Reynaldo, is very personal and deals with loss and grief. And it's a short piece that has been really, I don't know how much I can share about it right now, because it's such a very personal thing, and I want to give him the space for that. But it's just been incredibly meaningful to be connected to Reynaldo through this process, and to an honor to be playing this piece, which carries such weight. And it's a beautiful sort of heartbreaking piece that in this very short span really covers some ground. And so that's been really really beautiful to work through and work on. And then, you know, the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, aside from all the instrumentation and the percussion and the movie score, it's this idea of a Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon theme, which is, you know, kind of hidden masters. That a tiger could be crouching and that looks like a rock, or that a dragon could be sort of like looking like a post and it's actually unfurls and there's this great power. Sort of, if you've seen the movie, then you would relate to those undertones of tension that go through everything, that there's always more to what's going on. And I think there are just beautiful moments in the music that capture that so well. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful challenge to be expressive in a way that captures that something is beneath the surface. And for me, that's the key to this piece. Of non-expressiveness almost. Yeah. Like how much can you pack into a mezzo forte? That's, you know, it's like very, very geeky example, but it's very, that's been my guide to the piece. And I can't wait to share that with people.
And that's the audience will get that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, totally. And I personally, I'm a Michelle Yeoh absolute super fan. So
nice.
It's very exciting to hear that one of the pieces that she was, you know, engaging with. The movie at least is you know, getting some performance time.
Well, maybe there's still time to get to Chicago.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, well, yeah.
I'll send you the recording after.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us here at Classical Schmassical. It was such a delight to talk to you. And to our audience, if you enjoyed the show, there's plenty more where that came from. So please be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you wanted to continue the conversation, join us at our Discord, linked in the description, or to visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/classical schmassical. And remember, stay classy and questionably classical.